biological stages of growth and development within our adult-oriented sport, and that is the base being childhood. Mostly that's U6, U8, U10. You begin to get into the pubescent players. That's generally the U12 through U14 age groups. You begin to get into the adolescent age groups. That's generally U16 on up through U17, U18, U19 perhaps, although certainly you can throw those U19s biologically into the adult stage of development. But for our clubs, we cut off at U19 as far as youth play is concerned, and then they go on into adult play after that. So really one of the main things that we're looking for in terms of appropriateness of the development of our players is that we think of it as all being a lifetime participation in soccer. We don't want them coming in at U6 and going out at U13 and they no longer participate in the sport. So we want them in for a lifetime. So again, if we take as some of our markers as to how do we put together the development of players, we look at biological stages of human growth. So biologically, you see that roughly childhood is ages 4 to 9. Prior to that is toddlerhood, if there's such a word, and then infancy prior to that. But the beginning of most of our kids, in terms of coming into the typical soccer club, is probably in that under 6 age group, and then on up through under 10, roughly 9 years of age is childhood. So you see in that first far left-hand column, the row across is the training environment and some of the things that we would be looking for. This is not an exhaustive list on any of it, but it's all just some general markers for us to look at as to what do we want in that training environment. And then you see below that where it says matches, and these are some of the things that we're looking for in regards to their game day environment, in matches that they play and how we organize and set those up. So the next biological band is puberty, which again is roughly age 10 to 14. And again, the first row being some of what we're looking for in regards to their training environment, and then below that, what are we looking for in their match environment. And then for us in youth soccer, the final band would be this next one, which is adolescence, which is biologically about age 15 to 23. I was a college coach for many years. I can tell you that college players are perhaps in more ways than one. They're still in adolescence and some of the things that they do, but certainly biologically their bodies are still in adolescence. I saw many a 17, 18-year-old freshman go out looking like a grown man come 21, 22 years of age upon graduation a few years down the road. So this, again, are some of the markers for both their training environment and their match environment as to what are we looking to try to do as we progress in those through those bands, through those ages of development for them. So the next piece is what are we looking at in regard to the player development pyramid and some of the markers in terms of if you opened up the soccer book and you looked at the chapter headings for these different age groups, these would probably be the headings of the chapter. And then after that, you get into the details inside the chapter. So at under 6 and under 8, our chapter heading would be passion, fun, play. And passion, we're meaning a passion for the game. And I've told coaches for many, many years now that probably the most important thing that a coach of the under 6 and under 8 age groups can do is to share his or her passion for the game. If the kids at this age fall in love with the game, then there's a good chance that they'll stay with it for a long, long time, hoping for a lifetime. Well, part of that developing a passion for soccer is that you find the game fun. If it's not fun, why would a kid play a game? A kid would go do a different game if soccer's not fun for them. Fun doesn't mean that we're not trying to improve in the way that we play the game and our understanding of the game, but it's got to be at the forefront that it's a fun experience and it's not a whole bunch of miniature professional players in the minds of the adults connected with them. And then play. The training sessions need to be play in that they're more game-like activities that we do in the training sessions as opposed to drills. The matches need to be on smaller fields with fewer players, with a smaller ball, with a smaller goal, with a shorter period of play, so that children can play at the adult game of soccer. The next chapter is under 10, under 12, and there we're not doing ball skills earlier, but we're doing a lot of emphasis now on ball skills. We're teaching more about fair play because kids now in this age understand a whole lot more about playing together and about playing against other teams, with teammates. So we're doing a lot of not only the development of their ball skills, but also how to begin to use those skills in a game situation and matches. Then we're looking at applied skills, general tactics at U14. Again, the applied skills being a little bit more about specific, going hand in hand with the general tactics, a little bit more about the specific parts of the field. So just as one general tactical idea as an example that they should have been introduced to earlier on, but now should be expected to begin to do a little bit more thoroughly, and that's thinking of the game, of the field, as being divided into thirds. A defensive third, a midfield third, and an attacking third. Well, then you look at what are the applied skills. Well, in the attacking third, I'm going to do a whole lot more crossing of the ball than I'm going to do in the other 2/3 of the field, as a simple example. So it's that notion of how do I begin to apply the skills in context of the general strategies and tactics of soccer. And then under 16, we're getting a whole lot more into both technical and tactical functional training, and that is we're recognizing now at this age they should be pretty well committed to I'm a goalkeeper, or I'm a defender, or I'm a midfielder, or I'm a forward, and how do I do technical and tactical training that's functional to my role in the game. Now keep in mind, please, that particularly if you're a field player, no matter what age you are expected to be a versatile player, particularly at a higher level of play. Once again, thinking back to my college coaching days, I had a lot of guys that came in, I coached men, and I had a lot of guys that came in as freshmen from their high school team or their club team who played perhaps center midfielder for their club team, but were now going to be asked to play wing fullback on the college team, at least in their freshman year. And if they had that versatility, if they had that adaptability, then they could go on and continue to play at the collegiate level. So that's an important piece, even though we get into the functional training from U16 onward. So as you guys are putting together things for your training sessions, designing your lesson plans that you're going to do at a training session, you want to go through and you want to check the activities that you have written out on your session plan. So you ask yourself these questions on your checklist, and if the answers come up yes, then you're going in the right direction. So again, are the activities fun? They have to be age appropriate. Doing a 3 versus 2 in a small grid absolutely is fun for your under 12s. Not so fun for your under 6s. So what is fun depends upon a little bit of the age group. Are the activities organized? Do you as the coach have the right amount of equipment, the right number of cones, the right number of bibs, balls? Are they all in the right place for you to do the activity? Are the activities organized in terms of where are the players, how many players per grid, those sort of things? What's the coaching position so that you can observe and coach the kids? This is all part of the activities being organized in terms of equipment, space, players, and the coach's position. Then, are the players involved in the activities? This is getting to the idea that we want to do activities that are games of inclusion, not exclusion. So the example is, we don't want kids standing in a long line, waiting for their turn to come up, kick the ball one time, go to the back of the line. That, in essence, is a game of exclusion in that the players in the middle to the back of the line are being basically excluded, sometimes for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes while they wait for their turn to come to the front of the line, touch the ball 1 time, 2 times perhaps, and then go to the back of the line again. So are you designing activities in your training sessions where all of the players, or at least most of the players, are involved in the activities? So if it's back to that 3 versus 2 example, could I not set up 2 or 3 or 4 grids with 3v2s going on in each one of the training grids? Now all the players are involved in the activity, and I as the coach simply go from grid to grid to give coaching points and work my way back and forth between the grids. I don't have to coach everybody all the time. So I most importantly have the players involved in the activities, not standing and waiting for a turn to play the game. So next is creativity decision-making being used? Well, the challenge for creativity is us coaches stepping off to the side and allowing it to happen, to allow players to go through trial and error in the effort to come up with creativity. You know, that creativity could be a dribbling move. It could be some ideas about my positioning on the field. Creativity takes a lot of different forms in addition to what is done with the ball. But it's never going to happen that the coach is joystick coaching, micromanaging the players through everything that they do, which leads us to decision making. In the training sessions, you need to allow the players to think for themselves, to make decisions. This means that we are looking to perhaps ask the players a few more questions than giving them all the answers. So we want to do the same thing come game day. We want to sit down through a lot of the match, let the players get on with it, and let them make the decisions. This means back during the training sessions, while the players are going through the decision-making, a little bit of trial and error, the coach is there to help them along and to guide them along and to give them some of the correct information, but to not spoon-feed them. They don't need to be spoon-fed. They don't want to be spoon-fed. They don't want to be micromanaged. But they also do need your help as the coach. So we've got to find that balance in between kind of a laissez-faire approach and the over-management approach that a lot of coaches use. And then back to a little bit of the activities being organized, if you will. Are the spaces used appropriate? In that, is it the proper dimensions? Is a grid the proper dimensions for the number of players involved and for the age of players? Well, if it's a 3 versus 2 situation with under 12 players compared to under 18 players, I'm going to need a bigger grid with under 18s playing a 3v2 than I will with under 12s playing a 3v2. Perhaps it's with my teenage players, and are the spaces used appropriate in terms of, well, if I'm going to practice crossing and finishing, I need to do that in the attacking third, not in the midfield third. So it has to be appropriate sometimes in where on the field are we practicing a particular tactic or technical aspect that goes hand in hand with tactics, as well as perhaps the size of a training grid and so on. Then we've got to take a look at, during the training session, is the coach's feedback appropriate? That is, are you asking them the right questions at the right time, or are you giving them the right information at the right time, with your approximate percentage being about 60% questions and 40% just giving the information. But if we're just giving them the information all the time, then it's a little bit back to that old saying about in one ear and out the other. But if you're asking them appropriate questions that are soccer appropriate for the situation that they're in and they're age appropriate so that they can understand it, then that's the coach. That is actually a part of the coach's feedback. Because the questions that you ask them are guiding them towards a proper answer, but it's helping them to have their own light bulb go on. And that's really where the deepest learning goes on, is when their own light bulb, when they have their own aha moments happen for them during a training session. And then implications for the game. Well, that's going to look a little bit different from age group to age group. When you're out on the field with your little U6s and U8s and you're doing balance exercises and agility exercises and teaching them jumping mechanics and running mechanics, it's not always going to look like soccer to the untrained eye. But if the kid doesn't have, as the example here, proper physical literacy, that is, they don't have good control of their bodies, then how are they possibly going to control the ball? So we have to do the first things first, which is help them through basically physical education, which a lot of the kids do not get today in school. So the soccer coaches have to do a bit of that. And so at U6, U8, we might be doing those balance, agility, coordination exercises that we might not be doing at U16. We might be doing other things that have more of an implication for the U16 game as opposed to the under 6 game. We have to take a look now. We'll go through in a little bit of detail, a non-exhaustive detail, but a bit here for some of the age groups. We won't go through all of them, but we'll give you some ideas on all of them. And here we're looking at, as you see, about psychomotor, cognitive, and psychosocial development. We put those in there because those are the 3 domains of human development. All humans go through these 3 domains of development throughout all of our lives. It just begins to degenerate when we get after 50 perhaps, but we're looking at how do we grow and develop as youngsters through those 3 domains. And the greatest changes in growth in these domains occur during childhood. It continues through the years of puberty and adolescence and into early adulthood, but it's the most dramatic and obvious during childhood. So under 6s, cognitively, socially, emotionally, short attention span. Everybody knows that if you've been around 5, 6-year-old kids. So that means as the coach, you kind of got to get in, get out, give your information, and then get back to playing the game. They tend to still be egocentric. That is not egotistical. There's a difference. They're egocentric because they're still learning how to cope with the world and how to cope with other people. Let's not make the mistake of thinking that under 6 kids play team sports. They play at a team sport, but they don't actually play a team sport just yet. So they're still looking at the game of soccer as something from their perspective and how it does affect me, not anything about really necessarily about teammates and about the team as a whole. So they're playing in a team sport, but it's an individual sport for them within the context of a team sport. And then, of course, physically, under 6 kids are constantly in motion. They don't have any real sense of shifting the gears. So when you see them on game day, or even in their training sessions, under 6s tend to play flat out, then they stop. And they have a little bit of a rest for a minute, 5 minutes, and then they go back out and they play all out once again. So just realize that for the under 6 kids, this is just a natural part of the way that they play the game, and they're not really thinking or understanding yet this idea of pacing themselves. And then kind of back to connecting to the individual orientation of the kids, they're not really concerned or connected with team activities. In fact, you could put under 6 kids out on the field with each one of them in a different colored shirt, and it wouldn't change the under 6 game. The kids wouldn't care all that much that they all have on different colored shirts. They would play the game the same way that they do now. When one team is in blue and one team is in white, they're going to play the same way whether they have team uniforms on or not. So this is just the fact that they look at the game and play the game from their perspective, not from a team perspective. And then you look at the physical and mental characteristics of boys and girls at this age, very similar in terms of height, weight, the way that they understand how to connect with other people, understand ideas about how to play the game of soccer. They're all pretty similar in that regard. And then coordination's still pretty immature. They're still at the what in physical education is referred to as the gross motor movement. So it's big swings of the movement of the limbs rather than refined movements. Balance is still a bit raw. You'll see the youngest ones still have a fairly high center of gravity and topple over from time to time as they run around the field without anybody else around them. It's just part of having a high center of gravity. So it's just a little immature yet in regards to coordination overall, and then most certainly eye-hand and eye-foot coordination is primitive, and the nervous system in its development extends from the spinal cord out, and so it hits the limbs last, and the limbs that get fine control, close control last in the development of the human body are the feet. And so we can't expect them to be highly coordinated with the ball at this age. They can begin to do rudimentary things with the ball for sure, but not highly complex things with the ball just yet. And then at this age, really being able to track a moving object in the air, to understand its height, to understand its speed, to understand any spin or dip or swerve that the ball might have, that's really not there yet for 5- and 6-year-old kids. So catching is really primitive, and it's one of the reasons, among a couple of others, why we advocate holding off on the position of goalkeeper until the under 10 age group. So this age, as we said, no sense of pace, tend to go flat out in the way that they play the game all the time, and the same thing in the training sessions. And this is kind of the tactical sign, if you will, for under 6s. once the ball's going that way, we're going that way. Some of them can get the notion for sure that we're attacking that goal and defending this goal, but then the silly grown-ups change it at halftime and we get confused from time to time. But they tend to go whichever way the ball is going, and that means all of them. And that's okay. That's part of the development of kids this age. So the next one is under 8s, where there's still a lot of egocentric play in what they do, but they are beginning to play with a partner. Not necessarily all the teammates, but with a partner. So mentally, their attention span's a little bit longer, so you can stay on an activity in a training session a little bit longer. They're still playing quarters in their games instead of halves, but the quarters are a couple of minutes longer per quarter because they can stay with it mentally and physically for a little bit longer. But they're still not thinking all about the team. It's still largely individual play with a little bit of intentional partner play, pairs play on their part. So the group activities tend to be more pairs rather than larger groups. So they can all be in one group, but within that group they could be doing individual training activities or they could be doing pairs training activities, but they could all be in one large group. And when you bring them in during a training session and you're standing there talking to them and some of them are fidgeting, don't let that distract you. Don't think that it's the kids being disrespectful. This is just part of their bodies growing. And by the way, they've been cooped up in a chair at school all day long, sitting at a desk, listening to teachers lecture. And so they come to soccer to move and to play and to be outdoors. So keep your speeches short and the activities long. And then once again, in terms of where they're at physically and mentally, the boys and girls are still really similar, but the girls might be beginning to grow a little bit faster mentally and physically than the boys. And then under 8, they're beginning to be much more aware of what other people think of them and comments made to them. So there's no point as a coach in pointing out anything that went wrong with a kid in front of everybody else, unless it's a severe behavioral problem that you need to address immediately, because otherwise somebody's going to get hurt. But other than that, you need to not worry really about the mistakes that they're making. Yes, you're going to try to help them improve upon the parts of the game that need improvement, but they're 7 and 8 years old, so most everything's going to need improvement. Focus a little bit more on the things that they're doing right and the things that you want them to do again. And then ridicule, of course, has no place, I don't think, from a coach at any age, at any level of play. It's just not a useful teaching, coaching method. So take ridicule and leave it out of youth soccer altogether. And then 7 and 8-year-old kids, you know, there's rumors on the playground about Santa Claus. So they still want to believe, but they're teetering between what was reality and what is fantasy, and beginning to understand those things a little bit more. They are beginning to do this, and this line in here about imitating the big guys, sports heroes, that could be the players that they see on TV or at the local college game or the local professional game, but it could also be the big guys in the club. It could be the 12-year-olds. It could be the 14, 16, 18-year-olds in your own soccer club. So I absolutely would encourage the under 8 kids to go and watch the older teams in your club play from time to time. Those could be their sports heroes that they could directly connect with as opposed to just the ones that they see on TV. But those are good too. But the next line about fewer soccer players, that actually is beginning to change. So we are getting our kids beginning to have some of their sports heroes being soccer players, and soccer is just getting a whole lot more media attention, so it's in front of the kids a little bit more often. So I do think that piece is beginning to change in the United States. Physically, under 8 kids still need to do all of this. This is part of movement education, and it's part of what we need to intentionally put into our training sessions with the kids. And so you need to think about obstacle courses, things that they can do, you know, with cones and the soccer ball and the such that involves this movement education. They, too, at this age tend to go all out, and then they stop. They don't have a lot of shifting the gears, maybe a little bit, but it still tends to be pretty much playing flat out at the under 8 age group. Now, what they begin to do in regards to their tactical side at under 8 is they begin to go around people in the final thirds of the field. There's not really midfield play. That's kind of still straight down the field. But once they are going straight at the goal, they are beginning to go around the outsides of people in order to get to the goal. They're beginning to understand that part a little bit. And sometimes that can happen with an intentional pass to a friend, a teammate out on the field. This continues to be one of my favorite cartoons in all of youth soccer. I just like the little 7-year-old brother talking to his 4-year-old brother about why the professionals on TV can play so well. And I think this is an important message for all of the adults, coaches and parents, is that when we're yelling at them during a game, we are a mental distraction to them. They cannot attend to too many things at the same time, so they need to either pay attention to the game or listen to the coaches and the parents yelling from the sideline, and they can't really do both. So I prefer that they play the game and not be distracted by all of the voices from the sidelines, from the coaches and from the parents. Under 10 kids, attention spans getting longer. You can give them instructions for a little bit longer period of time. They are beginning to be much more team-oriented. May not necessarily know a whole lot about the club that they're in, but they know about the team that they're on within the club, and they're identifying with the fact that we have the same coach, we have the same color uniforms, etc. While they're in motion at this age and bounce around still a little bit, they can hold still for a real quick explanation, but they're not necessarily buzzing all the time in the way that they play the game. Physically, psychologically, socially, girls tend to be developing faster than boys at this age, so it's not unusual to see the girls at under 10 being a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, a little bit quicker than the boys, and then that begins to change as we get further into puberty and most certainly into adolescence. This age, they are beginning to assess their own play, but here's a key piece, please, everyone. They need to assess their play compared to themselves and trying to improve their best, not comparing themselves to other players. They have no control over other players. They only have control over themselves. And this is a really, really important lesson for coaches to teach players, is that you compete against yourself, and you're always trying to improve your best. And when you take that mindset, then you can do a lot of growth. But if you're stymied by being compared to other people, you're just going to probably digress in your development. So as I said, they're enjoying the team association and uniforms. They are inclined towards wanting to play rather than being told to play, so let's indeed give them the opportunities for pick-up games and play that is on their own terms. Physically, they're getting a lot more control of their body. It's not highly refined yet, but compared to under 6s and under 8s, it's really beginning to come along. And they, as I said, they prefer the team equipment and being a part of the group. They're a little bit more confident and firm and psychologically as to where they're at. They do begin to pace themselves, although they won't always be able to tell you why they're kind of out on the field shifting gears. But they absolutely are executing that in the way that they play the game. And they are beginning to be a little bit more aware at midfield that sometimes if we go outside, we can get back inside to where the goal is when we get further downfield to get a good shot on goal. So they're beginning to understand why it makes sense sometimes to go to the outsides of the field. This age group, under 12s, can be one of the more dangerous, if you will, age groups, because a lot of people look at them now as young adult players because they are playing a more sophisticated level of soccer, but they're by no stretch of the imagination under 19s physically, mentally, soccer, tactics-wise, any of that. But the changes because of different kids hitting puberty at different times is a big factor at this age. It can begin with the girls, as you see with the range there for girls. It could begin at the under 10 age group for some girls hitting puberty, and it could hit later for a lot of the boys. So there's a big range there as to when kids hit into puberty, early bloomers and late bloomers, and the middle of the bell curve bloomers. So coaches just need to be aware of all of those and not select into their teams just the early bloomers just because they're bigger, faster, stronger. Let's not leave out the late bloomers who many times end up being the better players in the long run. And then this is a factor, flexibility training and balance, dynamic flexibility, not static stretching. Dynamic stretching is a big part of the coordination of their bodies and being aware that because of the growth spurts, they're a little bit more susceptible to injuries. So we need to take a little bit more time in their warm-up and a lot more time in their cool-down after matches and after training. Cool-down is a really important piece from here on. They can begin to connect skills together in that I can receive, turn, and dribble and make it all look like it's one motion, all one thing, rather than three separate things. And then we have to be careful because of the growth spurt. It's easy to get overuse injuries, so we have to back up a little bit on the number of matches, the number of tournaments that they do, maybe a few more training sessions, a few more regeneration training sessions, so that we can keep them in our sport. And if they stay in the game through the under 12 and under 14 age groups, then there's a really good chance that they'll stay with it for a lifetime. But this is the age, the beginning of the age, 12 to 15, generally is when kids begin to drop out of organized sports because it has been too intense for them. And so we just need to be careful that we don't burn them out physically or emotionally, mentally. And then problem solving. Well, that's a game of soccer. We have to be able to think on our feet. We have to be able to move and think all within the game. And a player that can think a little bit ahead of what's happening in the game, that's the player that's more likely to go a little bit further in the sport. If they're a kid who's always just reacting to what just happened, that's probably not a kid who's thinking ahead. And so we want those players to be able to think ahead in the game. And then they're beginning to understand more because of this aspect of their overall human development. They're beginning to understand more about team rules, about the laws of the game, and why those rules are there, not just living up to them simply because of grown-ups making them live up to them. They're beginning to understand some of the spirit of the laws of the game, if you will. And then this is occurring for sure, has been for a long time for the modern child, and we need to get them outside, playing more, interacting with other people directly face-to-face, as well as through the computer and sitting in front of the TV and so on. That hasn't changed really. It's just become a little bit more of a problem than it was a generation ago. And this is another normal part of human development. It's part of kids learning how to be independent. And so this team sport, soccer, is a great way for them to spend more time with friends while their parents are within a safe distance, but part of the growth of the kids. So soccer provides a great opportunity to be able to do that. And then, of course, they're becoming much more aware of their popularity and how they fit in and the such and the effects that that has upon them. So those are the ages where we gave you some details, since that's the beginning of it all. Now some general information for you. I want you to think, please, about what's the training session to match ratio, and that how many training sessions do I have to a match. So we're going to go through, we're going to hit frequency, we're going to hit duration, and we're going to hit this ratio. So as you take a look at it, under 6, we're looking at 1 day a week, about 45 minutes long as far as the training session goes, maybe 1 match a week. Some clubs have done this to where they have an hour block on Saturday or Sunday. The kids come in, as you see here. They do some activities for 20 or 30 minutes, and then they play the game for 20 or 30 minutes and go home. Others have 1 training session for 30 to 45, maybe 60 minutes, and others then play a match after that. So one idea there. For U8s, we're getting into this ratio of training sessions to matches. For under 10s, we're getting into this ratio of training sessions to matches. So that's 2 training sessions per week for 1 match per week is what is nationally recommended. For under 12s, the recommendation is training sessions 2 to 3 days per week for every match that they play. Under 14s, 3 days per week for sure of their training sessions to every match that they do. So I hope the message that you're getting here, everyone, is that we need to have more training sessions per week than we do matches. If we don't do that, it's akin to sending your kid to school, and the only thing they do at school is take examinations. They don't get classes. So here's a few characteristics of well-selected games, and by this, we're talking about the games that you do in training sessions, the activities that you do in training sessions. And this is from Dr. Marianne Torbert. And as you can see there, it's opportunities to experiment and experience. So that's that trial and error that they need to go through a little bit, but that's an important piece in a training session of learning what works and what doesn't work along with the coach's guidance. And then lots of things can be accommodated in terms of levels of play and participation. One of the things that I advocate there is, can we as a club get some mixed age group, mixed gender, mixed levels of play pickup games once every 2 or 3 weeks in the club? And if clubs can do that, rather than kind of the girls only practice with the girls, under sevens only practice with the under sevens, if we can mix it up a little bit and have some pickup games, then the player's development is accelerated because of that additional piece of getting exposed to older, younger players, both genders, and higher and lower levels of play, all participating in the same pickup games from time to time, which is very much the old neighborhood game where it was a mixed ages and levels of ability. And then this is the feedback from the coach. So that feedback could be in the form of a guided discovery question. It could be in the form of a direct comment to the player, but it's giving them helpful, useful information to get them to understand a little bit better of, so relationships between cause and effect. And that could be, why we sometimes play the ball backwards or square in order to go forward. We do that to keep possession and then to be able to get in behind the defense with a forward pass, as an example. And then we'll realize there's going to be mistakes. They're forgiven. There's not a single player on the planet at any level of play that doesn't make mistakes. Tune into an MLS match, go watch one live, and you'll see mistakes made by every player out on the field. Same thing in the women's professional league. Same thing with every professional league everywhere on the planet. Even those very, very high-level players are making mistakes, even in a World Cup. So let's forgive our kids when they make mistakes. It's just part of the learning process. And then the opportunity to try again, that's in the training sessions. At the younger ages, even in the game, we have some of the rules that allow a do-over, like at U8 with throw-ins, as an example. If you make a mistake one time, we give you a do-over before we give the ball to the other team. And then we have to teach and expect the kids to improve upon their either emotional capability of perseverance, coping with frustration. That shot just hit the woodwork and bounced out. Can you get over that frustration and carry on with the game and get another shot, as an example from within the sport? And then last couple of ideas here from Torbert, and that is some of these ideas about giving the game back to the players in training sessions and in matches, because soccer is, after all, a player's game, not a coach's game. And so we need to coach that way in our training sessions and be there to guide them and to support them, but to think about how they are going to be playing the game and how that impacts how we train them to play the sport itself. And that final bullet point of the enhancement of the possibility of possible social interactions, that is teamwork. But it's not just teamwork. It's also that interaction with the other team. The other team's not the enemy. They're just another group of kids. They're out playing the sport. And so we have to look at them as fellow competitors. And that's a part of that socialization within sport. And then by this last bullet point, we're talking about the players that we want to be sure don't get left out. That is sometimes that light bloomer that we want to be sure that we keep that kid involved, particularly at the under 12, under 14 age groups, where some of the late bloomers are getting selected out in favor of the early bloomers. So that was a quick overview, if you will, coaches, of some age-appropriate practices and expectations. And we have a little bit of time, I believe, for a little bit of Q&A.
Yeah, I'd send a message to everyone, but if you do have any questions, you can enter them into the question box, and we'll answer them as they come in. If you can't think of any now, obviously you guys have my contact information, and I'm sure if you give me questions, Sam would be more than willing to answer those questions. So questions, are there good resources for specific activities for U8? So coming from the Cal South standpoint, we have put together 10 weeks, because our season's 10 weeks, Sam, of U6s, U8s, U10s, and U12s. And those will go online with our new website. Marketing tells me September 8th or 9th. So you'll have access to those. As to go along with the actual activities, the picture of the activities, the description, we've actually videotaped the U6s, each activity. So you'll have a brief 30 to 45 second clip of the activity for the U6s, and we'll continue on with the older age groups throughout the year. But I know that's a frustrating piece for new coaches, is finding those age appropriate and developmentally appropriate activities online, because it can be quite the challenge to find them. Obviously, Barcelona's U6s aren't the same as your U6s, so you just need to make sure that whatever you're doing is appropriate. So anything to add there, Sam?
I think it's a great track to go down, Elliot, for any coach, whether a beginner or been in the game for a while. Going to your state association and the national association's websites for information is your best bet. So look at the Cal South website, look at the USU Soccer website for information on coaching any age group. There's information there for every age. And then you can also, for sure, take a look at the U.S. Soccer website, particularly if you're coaching teenage players. A great resource.
Okay, just looking at recommended practice times and days for U6s. Just to reiterate, I think it was 45 minutes one time a week if you're going to play one time a week.
That's right.
How much play versus training should the practice focus on? Maybe you can answer that one, Sam.
I would say part of it is how you think about what's going on. So if you're using game-like activities as opposed to drills, then it's all play, if you will, for the kids. But I'm assuming by play we're meaning 3 versus 3 match, and that absolutely could be 40% of the training session. Some days, if the activities go really well, it could be 10 or 20%. Other days, you do want to give the kids more time to play the game, and so that's that quote-unquote scrimmage that you might have at the end. So I would say a good rule of thumb would be about 30-40% of the training time should be with that scrimmage.
Okay. And I think if you look at the activities on USU Soccer's website, you look at the activities on Cal South's website, a lot of the activities building up to the final match are very game-like as well. So even though it's not the end product, the kids still are going to enjoy the games, the activities that they're participating in, and it has a direct focus and a direct relationship with the final game. So one question here, Sam, and we get this one a lot. Can you comment briefly on discipline for 6 to 7-year-olds during practice? Is a short timeout recommended, or is there another method recommended?
If it gets to that stage, then a timeout is recommended. Now, if you sit a kid down for a little while, you need to be sure that he or she is away from distractions. So sit them away from the pile of balls, but also sit them where you can supervise, where you can see them for safety's sake. First and foremost, but also so that you can go back every moment or two and check with the kid, are you ready to play, are you ready to behave correctly, and if you are, then you're allowed to go back into the activity that's going on. But I think some of the misbehavior by a 7-year-old that some coaches will see is because basically the coaches have bored the kids. They have them standing in long lines, so the kids are bored and they get into mischief. They're acting like 7-year-olds. So I think if coaches design game-like activities that involve all the players, either in one big grid or 2 or 3 different grids going on with the same activity, but all of the kids are engaged, then that misbehavior goes down a whole lot. As long as they're active, kids tend to then be able to stay on focus a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. The selection of your activities will be directly related with the attentiveness and how involved the kids are in the activity. Like Sam said, if you put a kid in line, or 20 kids in line, they get 2 touches every minute. Obviously, the kid in the back of the line is going to be pushing the kid in front of him, and you tend to get frustrated. But at the end of the day, you can eliminate a lot of that by eliminating lines and drills, we call them, rather than doing fun game-like activities.
So what's that saying? Eliminate elimination?
Yes. Okay, so we got time for a couple more, so let's see here. I have heard a few coaching sites say that U6, U7 should not learn the basic inside of the foot pass due to their physical abilities or limitations at that age. Is there any truth to that particular skill at that age level?
You know, there is a school of thought that says that the natural body mechanics at that age is actually easier to strike the ball with your instep, that is the top of your foot where your shoelaces are. To hit the ball with the inside of your foot requires this outward turn of the toes, this opening of the hip of the kicking leg, which actually requires more body balance than when the leg is more in its straight line with the hip itself, which is the posture that you're in when you strike the ball with your instep, when you have little touches with the instep, the top of your foot. I don't have a problem at all with, hey, I want to teach dribbling with the instep and maybe a little bit of shooting with the instep, that is the top of the foot, as opposed to doing that right away with the inside of the foot for a little bit of dribbling or a little bit of a shot or a little bit of a pass with the inside of the foot. I'm aware of this school of thought. My practical experience has been that a lot of the kids, even young ones, can do both. But if I see a kid that's particularly awkward with the inside of the foot, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to rush it because I'd rather wait for another 6 months, year, whatever it's going to take for some of the coordination to come into play. Than to force it too early and the body mechanics end up being learned incorrectly. And then we have to go about kind of reteaching it later on. If you can get some of the kids beginning to strike the ball with the inside of the foot, you're okay. And there's a bunch of different little games that you can play at the under 8 age group for 6, 7, 8-year-olds where a lot of opportunities arise in the game for them to hit the ball with the inside of the foot. It could be little tag type games where by passing the ball we're trying to hit a cone with the ball, or we're trying to hit a moving target like the coach and try to hit the coach in the legs with the ball as we dribble around and pass off of the dribble. And you'll be able to do some of those types of activities and see from their body mechanics if they're having great difficulty with it, then go ahead and back up. But if they're beginning to get the feel for it, then it's okay.
Okay, couple. So this is a position-specific question, Sam. If a U11 player feels she found a position they want to specialize in playing, do you recommend encouraging to play elsewhere on the field or just let it be?
I'm going to continue to encourage them to play in more than one position. Now, I'm not going to do that like game to game to game. I'm going to, hey, you're going to play this position for the next, 2 or 3 or 4 games. And maybe I'm telling the player that number of games that I'm anticipating her playing that position or not. Maybe I'm keeping that thought and information to myself so that I can continue to assess her in her play. But U.S. Soccer and USU Soccer both have advocated for 30-plus years now that through the under 14 age group, players get exposed to playing all of the positions on a soccer team. We don't know what position that ultimately will end up being their best. And at 11 years of age, the kid may not really know what ends up being her best position in the long run. They might be playing that position because they just feel like they've got a better handle on how to play that particular role, and they don't want to get out of their comfort zone. Taking people out of their comfort zone is difficult, but that's the only way that you improve, be you a player or a coach, is getting out of your comfort zone. It could be that the kid's getting a lot of reinforcement at home for playing that particular position. So part of the discussion needs to be with all of the parents about how important it is, how important versatility is, and how much that's valued by higher level coaches. And Elliot can speak as well as I within the Olympic Development Program as an example. When the kids get older, about how important that versatility and adaptability is, because you end up with a state team with, a dozen midfielders, and we need somebody to play forward and somebody to play in the back.
Yeah, I think even this past year, I think and it happens a lot on our women's side, is when a youth, Cal South youth, gets called into the national camp, I would say probably on the women's side over 50% are asked to play in positions that they're not accustomed to. And what happens at the national level, if you say, no, I don't want to play this position, well, they'll just go find someone else who will play that position. So especially within Cal South, we push our kids to play multiple positions at the state level, because once you get called into the national team, if you have that versatility, you're much more useful and much more valuable to the team. So definitely.
I would absolutely continue to encourage that young lady to play some different roles. It's going to help her tactically, because of seeing the game from different positions. You see the game a little bit differently. You get asked to do some ball skills a little bit differently from position to position, or you get more frequency of different ball skills from position to position. So it's still an important part of her development at 11 years of age.
Yep. So, and Sam mentioned the different thirds of the field. Obviously, playing in different positions exposes you to those different thirds, and what I need to do more in the defensive third, what I need to do less of in the attacking third. So it develops a more well-rounded player, both physically and mentally. Okay, I think we got time for one more.
Okay.
How much time shall we dedicate to stretching during the training session in order to adequately prevent injuries?
Well, I think we need to be up to date for sure on the stretching. So first of all, static stretching is kind of going by the wayside. Certainly during the warm-up, you can do some static stretching during the cool down. But static stretching during the warm-up that we've done for decades, the newest research is showing us that it actually can begin to deplete energy reserves. And so we don't want to start off a training session or a match with already depleting our energy reserves. So what we want to do is dynamic range of motion stretching. So if you've been in the game long enough, you might recall back, we used to call it the Brazilian warm-up, where it's all kind of, different types of swinging of the legs and the arms and clapping and moving, and rhythmic movement is a lot of what it was. And that's what we need to do more of in our warm-up with our players for body control, as well as for getting range of motion around the joints. And so how long I do each of those greatly depends upon the age. So the pre-adolescents need less of that than the adolescents or the young adult players do. The under 6s, under 8s need virtually none. And the under 10s don't need a great deal of it. It's just a matter of trying to begin to get them into good habits. So I might do 5 to maybe 10 minutes of quote-unquote warm-up that includes some stretching and things with the ball on both game day and training day with under 10s, and about 5 minutes or so of cool down, and then that ratio just goes up a little bit by a couple of minutes per age group. I see coaches out with teenage teams, under 17s, at the national championships or at regionals, and some of them are out there for 30, 45 minutes doing warm-up, and the game hasn't even started yet. So the kids have got to be already pretty well depleted before kickoff. So it doesn't need to be as long as some people think.
Okay. Yeah, I think definitely if you guys have a younger team, 6s and 8s, we get this question a lot at the youth module courses, but just due to the frequency of practice and the amount of time at practice, so 45 minutes one time a week or an hour one time a week, you really need to focus on get the kids playing right away rather than focusing on the stretching. Because I've never seen a 5-year-old pull a hamstring, but I have seen a 5-year-old who definitely needs more touches on the ball. So definitely something to think about if you do have a younger team. Get them playing right away. And then we have one other question, heading the ball and concussion question. I can tell you that U.S. Soccer is working on a stance right now. And I don't know if U.S. Youth Soccer has something in writing, but I know Cal South is also working on something. So, and we'll address what we think is appropriate at different age groups. in terms of heading the ball, because obviously it's a hot topic all over. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add now, Sam, about that.
We have a couple of things. One, on our website, there is a chart that shows our recommendation of when and how to begin to teach heading in terms of the ages and the frequency of that as a training session topic, et cetera. And then we also have, when it comes to an actual concussion, which doesn't happen all that often from heading the ball as opposed to head-to-head contact and that such. But we also have on our website our concussion protocol. So if a player does have a concussion, what's the protocol for that player coming back into training sessions and matches? And that's up on our website as well.
Okay. Well, I think that puts us right at 1 o'clock our time, 3 o'clock Sam's time. So just want to say thank you very much, Sam, for giving your time, and thanks to everybody who logged in. What we'll do is we have a recording of this, and also I have a copy of the actual presentation that Sam put together and presented today. So I will email everybody who logged in that, so you have a copy of it. And then the presentation will be online probably within the next week if you want to reference back, or you have any other coaches who have any questions regarding that. And one final thing, obviously, if you're coaching here within Cal South, your first line of defense is your club or your organization, your director of coaching, your president. But then I'm in the state office, obviously, dealing the coaching education side. So if you ever have specific questions that maybe they can't answer, or you wanted it expanded upon, always feel free to contact me. And Sam's always available, too. If you have questions for Sam, I can make sure that he gets those, because he is very gracious and very knowledgeable about everything that's going on here. So, but thanks again, Sam.
My pleasure, Elliot. Thank you for having me on.
Of course. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.